New Age words that mean nothing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this little live stream we're doing today, chatting about New Age terminology and what the difference between what New Agers mean by a word and what it probably actually means, and sort of exploring how these kinds of terms crop up moment to moment within New Age circles. We have just had a bit of a cat situation. There wasn't vomit, but there may be. So hopefully that doesn't happen during the live stream. But I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who's here. Thank you everybody who's come along. I see you all in the chat. I'll go through that in just 1 second. But before we do, I just got to say this, right? This is the second of some live streams that I'm hoping to do sort of more regularly. And I've decided to call the series Let's Talk About This, because I feel this is sort of more informal, sort of fun setting to actually approach these kinds of things. Some things aren't going to be best to talk about in like a normal edited video format. This is probably a bit more fun, a bit more interactive and stuff. So that said, New Age words that mean nothing. Let's talk about this. That's good, isn't it? Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Andy Fellows, and I make videos on cults, skepticism, and making sense of life after New Age spirituality. If you're interested in a more grounded and skeptical approach to New Age spirituality, then why not subscribe to the channel and hit the bell? Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to check through the chat and say hi to everybody. Marie, thank you for sending that super sticker through. Appreciate that. You said bonjour. Comment tu quelle est la date de ton anniversaire? Those are my French words. Back at you there. Hey Cher, hey Marie, hey Christine, hey Kate, hey Luca. Hello everybody. Bagley, just some Bagley. Welcome. Is that how I'm supposed to be pronouncing that? But yeah, hello everybody. Welcome. Glad to have you all here. So should we dive into this? I've got a bunch of suggestions from people on Instagram, which, by the way, where is it? There. If you follow me on Instagram, then I've been a bit more interactive on there. So you can kind of it's things like this is where I'm going to sort of be reaching out to people saying, hey, look, I'm doing this, give me your input, so if you want to be involved in that kind of side of things, then check out the Instagram, definitely. But so that's where I got some suggestions from here. I've got a bunch in my notes, and then as we're going through this, if there's anything you think of, like just words that you hear in sort of New Age circles, words you might maybe used to say, then drop them in the chat, and I'll drop into the chat to sort of talk about those ones as well. But yeah, happy to hear any feedback and any standout comments I'm going to put up on the screen as normal as we're going through this as well. Hopefully you can hear me and see me all right. I realized the pop filter was kind of in the way of my face. Not ideal. But yeah, hopefully you can hear me and see me all okay, and we're all good in that department. But yeah, so let's just say quickly, obviously there's going to be some variation with these words as to like how they're used by different people in different situations, in different sort of circles, if you like, subsets of the New Age. So I'm speaking from my experience here on these words. You might have had a different experience of these words. So if you have, then feel free to drop that in the chat and let me know sort of your experience with them. And it'll be interesting to see what other ways these kinds of terms are applied. But yeah, as I say, feel free to also suggest any other sort of ideas and stuff, any other words in the chat. So what I kind of want to do with this is I kind of want to go through these terms and kind of go like what New Agers mean when they use the word, and then what the term effectively means in that context. And then, of course, we can explore a little bit about what the word actually means in a non-New Age context. I do think that a lot of that's going to be self-explanatory. It's obviously going to be fairly obvious, I think, some of the words in a non-New Age context. But in this, I kind of want to demystify a little bit, and as ever, have a bit of a laugh, because we're bound to have a bit of a laugh because some of this stuff is very strange. I've got my notes here, so if you see me looking down, that's me looking at my notes to make sure I don't just chat shit, because I don't want to just talk shit. I've got a drink here, got a fizzy to keep my energy levels at a minimum, above crashing. The sugar will keep me going for now. Caffeine will give me a wave to ride, and then when this live stream's finished, I'll fall asleep. So I think the first word we've got to talk about, you cannot talk about New Age terminology without having a conversation about vibration and frequency, right? I mean, these words are just, you cannot escape them, right? I was doing a bit of research on what was it I was looking at? The Akashic Records. I was reading about that a little bit. Reading. I don't read. I can't read. I'm using images here. I'm actually just going off of my own sophisticated set of hieroglyphics. No, I was watching. What am I talking about? That must be the caffeine. I was watching videos on YouTube as I was doing a bit of research on like Akashic Records to hear sort of other points of view on it, and it's baffling. You literally just any couple of seconds, just looking at anything with New Age stuff, you're gonna get vibration, you're gonna get frequency. I just seen Luke, you said, just noticed, but I love the Lloyd Evans shirt. Yes, this is Lloyd Evans merch. I have to show it off. The Followers Awaken Cult Wars, love it, absolutely love this shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts to wear. Especially when speaking with Jehovah's Witness family members. But yeah, so vibration and frequency is where to start, really. Obviously when New Agers are talking about this, it's coming from this whole point of view. So this is how I used to explain this as well when I believed in this. It's the idea of like, right, everything is energy, and everything vibrates at a certain frequency, and it's the frequency that things vibrate at that makes them what they are, basically, right? So there is ultimately nothing so different between me and you than the fact that the energy has come together in a certain way to create me and to create you. We're all one, essentially, and it's a vibrational frequency of a given thing, that this, that, and the other, right? Essentially, the idea of frequency or vibration, it sort of hooks into this notion of what makes a thing, right? The vibration of a thing is the unique quality of that thing, right? And mostly this terminology is used around like energy, right? Emotion, that was the word. It's used around emotion, right? So the idea of like your vibration, it ties into your emotional state. So if you're a high vibrational state, then have very good mood, very, very happy person. And if you have a low vibrational state, then you're very sad or angry or whatever it is they've decided is a bad emotion. And so it's largely ties into positive and negative, and just this fixation on the idea of certain things being inherently good and certain things being inherently bad, even though a lot of, and this is interesting, this is where New Age sort of becomes contradictory. A lot of the ideas in New Age become contradictory, because alongside this idea that some things are inherently high vibrational and some things are inherently low vibrational, you also get this idea of sort of a moral relativistic approach, in a way, like moral relativism, where it's like actually nothing is inherently good, nothing is inherently bad, it all just is what is. I suppose that just depends which rabbit holes you go down, but there is that interesting contradiction that you do see. And many people that believe one thing also believe the other, which is a bit strange that there is that sort of incongruency there, I think. The idea with this is the energy and vibration thing. It's so tied into like the law of attraction as well, right? It's the idea like attracts like, and they use the idea of magnets, which is not how magnets work, but you do you know. But there's that kind of a thing, and it's all kind of hooked into So this is something I need to say on this, right? Vibration and frequency. People talk about raising your vibration. They talk about raising the vibration of the planet on this earth at this time or whatever, right? But I think what they mean is increasing the frequency of the vibration, right? Does that make sense? And so oftentimes you will hear people saying raising the vibration, which I think if you look at what this actually is, the idea that everything is vibrating, everything in order to I've got hair in my mouth, in order to like exist at all, right? And this is where we broach the limit of my we approach the limit of my knowledge on these kinds of things. So if I get this wrong, and you know better than me, correct me. But like, obviously, the fact that anything exists at all depends on its vibration, right? The fact that it vibrates, right? Because everything that's physical is some sort of vibrating mess of particles, right? And so if a vibration of a thing changes, it would literally cease to be that thing in a physical context, right? I think I'm right in saying that. But then you get into this idea with, it's a sort of new agey thing, is that also applies to emotions, and that an object could have a certain frequency, and if you in your mind and your emotional state and your thoughts align yourself with the frequency of, let's say, a Ferrari, then you're going to be able to attract that into your life, right? Now, I feel like, and I could be wrong on this, but I think that if you align yourself with the vibrational frequency of a Ferrari, by which I mean you embody the vibrational frequency of the Ferrari, surely you just become a car. And that might be a bit facetious, and I am kind of joking there, but like surely that's what that I know they often say, well, no, it's actually, you have to actually get yourself into the emotional space of the person who has the Ferrari, and then you're in alignment with it. But then what that is really is just, it's this spiritual veneer kind of thing, is the phrase I use all the time on the channel, is just you adding a level of mumbo jumbo on top of just basically believe that it's accessible in your life. So when you look at what they think it means, when a lot of people say it, it's basically the idea of the inherent quality of a thing, right? And yet when they I've got so much to say on this, and I'm trying to like get my point across without just going off in 100 directions. So I apologize if this is making much sense. But like, so you've got vibration, right? The vibration of a thing, the fact that it vibrates at all, the frequency of a thing is the speed at which that thing vibrates, right? So if you're raising the vibration, that doesn't really make any fucking sense, right? Literally, if you raise the vibration of something, what does that mean? What does that mean? You could raise the frequency of that thing. That makes sense. And some people do use that terminology. And I think it's interesting, if you listen to a lot of these new age people on YouTube and stuff, as we have over the last couple of months on this channel, more specifically, you can see that the ones who are just repeating stuff they've heard without really thinking about it, these are the people that say raising the vibration. But then there's people that say raising the frequency. That actually makes a little bit more sense. It's still fucking nonsense, but it makes a little bit more sense in terms of the definition of the word. Do you know what I mean? Like, to raise the frequency, raise the speed at which the vibration is occurring. Okay, that makes sense. To raise the vibration, what is that? You've just gone like that with a vibration. Like, what does that mean? That's something that baffles me a little bit here. And I think that's where someone like Teal Swan, for example, seems to have a little bit of like an edge on the people that, you know, the muggles that seem to just be repeating this stuff on the internet, because she uses the term vibrational frequency, which again doesn't make any fucking sense when you actually think about what that means in reality. But when you look at the meaning of the words, then that makes sense. And it's ironic as well, because when you actually think about the meaning of words with this kind of thing, because so much of the way that New Agers tend to make their points to try and convince you of something is, well, if you look at the etymology of the word, you look at the meaning of the word, and they'll split the word up, and they'll do a little word game to make it seem more profound than it is, right? So much of how a New Ager often will try to make an argument, or especially these sorts of New Age sort of leaders that you see coming around that sort of 2012 period. I saw a lot of people doing this when I was into this. Maybe it was happening before then as well. It probably was. But they'll take a word. They'll say, well, if you look at the history of the word, you look at the etymology, it actually means this. And then if you split the word up, then it means this and this. And you put that together, and then here's a new meaning that I've just made up, right? And so with this kind of a thing, when you actually look at the meaning of vibration, you look at the meaning of frequency, and you try to make it mean what they want it to mean, it's surprising that given the focus on etymology and grammar and what all these words are supposed to mean, it just doesn't really make much sense. Do you know what I mean? That it's like there's an incongruency there. Like, they thought about the stuff that they can use to make the point they want to make, but they haven't thought about the stuff that is the bedrock of all of their beliefs. It's like they've taken that as a given, and we've just gone on to talk about what inspire really means, or do you know what I mean? What believe really means. It's bizarre, really. But yeah, I think I'm reading off my notes here. I've written what they really mean, though, is a mix of. So in terms of like what a vibration, what a frequency means, what I've written here is what they really mean, though, is a mix of how something makes them feel and how positive or negative a thing is. And here, I think, is where you get into that dodgy area of creating a hierarchy of emotion, creating this idea that certain emotions are better or more high vibrational than others, and certain emotions are worse and more low vibrational than others. And I think that is really concerning, because, you know, anyone, so again, 100 directions you can go down. But anyone who has done any work with their mental health, anyone who's been to counseling, anyone who's read up on like a good way to go about, you know, looking after your emotional state and, you know, self-care and all that kind of stuff, you'll realize that emotions aren't necessarily inherently good or bad. They might be pleasant, they might be comfortable, they might be uncomfortable, they might be destructive, they might be constructive, they might be overwhelming or whatever. And yet that to what am I trying to say, that I think that being the case, to then try to organize those into, like, for example, Abraham Hicks vibrational emotional scale or whatever. The cats are playing behind me. Can you see them? Absolutely going wild. But yeah, to organize that then into a scale, when it comes to mental health, that becomes an issue, because a large part of like having, and I speak for myself here, and you may also have found this too, if you've done similar to me with this, is that actually learning to be on better terms with myself, learning to have a healthier sort of emotional life and be healthier generally with regards to my mental health. It's become largely about learning to recognize my emotions, learning to recognize that the fact that I'm feeling a thing at all is not inherently bad or good. It's what I do with that. Do you know what I mean? And it might not feel inherently bad or good. It's what I do with that. And yet there is this huge focus here around in New Age circles, and I think, I don't know, it's probably been taken by and run by other people, but I do see it with like Abraham Hicks, for example, with this emotional scale of like, yeah, on the one hand, you've got like very positive emotions. On the one hand, you've got very negative emotions. You could see how that could lead someone to want to avoid their negative emotions, or think of them as bad, when actually all of these kinds of emotional states are part of a human experience. They're part of the human life, aren't they? There's just the way to exist as a human. Yeah, so that's I think that would be my main concern when it comes to the idea of emotions and vibrations and frequency. But really what they mean, I think, is largely how a given thing makes them feel. And it's just like it's a new, more sort of sacred sciencey version of vibe, or feeling, or whatever, energy, you know, similar kind of thing. Looking back further, you know. Let me just check through the chat a little bit here and see what you're saying, and we'll get on to the next one. So there's some playing around with the vibration, and I just want to see if there's anything to say. Oh, Key, you've said here, I have a good one. Source, interesting one, isn't it? It's basically God. It's like a repackaging of God, but a little bit more like the Force from Star Wars, right? That's effectively what that is. But yeah, Mark, it's probably blocking you posting links because it blocks everyone posting links. I don't know if that's changed because YouTube's changed anything, but yeah, there's not much I can do about that at the moment. Sorry, but if you, any of the links you're posting, Mark, they are actually in the description as well. So if anyone wants to access any of the links that Mark's referencing in the chat, then you can do that there. But yeah, source is basically God in it, and everyone's got their own sort of version of it. I think source is an interesting one because when you kind of look at the application of it in different contexts, it starts to, I mean, I guess even that's true of God as well, isn't it? The way that it's used, the way that it is applied in a given context just changes based on whoever wants to use it and whatever they mean by it. But generally it's God. Generally it means God, I think. Dab King there, you've said thinking that one set of emotions is better than others creates the perfect set up for dogmatism. I'd agree with that, yeah. Sophia, you've said, yes, but my emotions count more than the emotions of others because my emotions are actually magic and signs of something very special. It's because I've had a spiritual experience, so follow me. Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. 100%. So if anyone's looking for a new leader, Sophia's available. Marie, you've said, regarding emotions, there's a big difference between having an emotion and then the actions you either take or don't take on that emotion. Just having an emotion is just human. Yes, exactly. Totally agree. And thank you for sending that sticker through as well, Marie. I've just seen that one you've sent through. Lindell has said, resonate. Oh, don't get me started on resonate. Oh, this one does my head in. I think if you followed me on Instagram, you've seen I've talked about what resonates. If you've been watching the channel a while, you've seen I've done at least 2 videos talking about why that's just a terrible idea. The idea of like navigating reality and deciding what's true on the basis of what resonates with you. Just it's like it blows my mind how easily, and I again speak for myself in the past with this, how easily you can end up like just believing total nonsense because it resonates with you. But then of course it does. Of course you can, because the idea of what resonates is really just what feels good to you. And if you're using that as the basis of what how to determine truth or whatever, then naturally you're gonna come up against your own biases and stuff like that. I'm just watching now because I've got this door closed and the cat litters through this door. Ned might want to go there. Hopefully he can hang on for a little while. But yeah, resonate. I think what they mean when they say resonate is, again, it's similar to like vibration, right? How it feels. It's just it's almost like the vibration is the noun, and resonate is the whichever one's describing word. Is that adjective or verb? Like if something resonates with you, then that's it doing a thing that makes you feel good, right? It's so interesting, right? So interesting. But yeah, resonate a funny one, isn't it? Because when you actually dig down onto how it's applied, it's really just a replacement now for intuition or for that feels good to me. And yet there's that mysticism that's built up around it genuinely being like a worthwhile way to determine, cats are at it again, a genuinely worthwhile way to determine what the truth is, and how and to navigate reality, to interface with reality. You know, it's interesting. It's so interesting, and yeah, and actually that's interesting there as well, Luca. have you said? Yeah, as soon as you say it doesn't resonate, people tell you to get the fuck out. Like, yeah, that's interesting as well, because there is that. Yeah, on the one hand, you've got take what resonates, and then on the other hand, if it doesn't resonate with you, then that's probably because you're not awakened enough or whatever. It's fascinating, but then isn't that part of a problem that you're gonna come up against when the idea is that you're in a when you're in a community of people or in a movement of people who are all just deciding what's true based on what feels good to them, right? And ironically, what feels good to them tends to be a large crossover, which is where you can even sit and say, like, New Age beliefs, that there is that huge crossover, between a lot of them. But the fact that a lot of people are navigating the world by deciding what resonates is what's true, and then you come and say, actually, no, I don't agree with you on that. Then they go, well, then you're not awakened enough. They explain it away, in that classic way of like explaining it away with the lowest possible motivations. You're not awakened enough, or you haven't seen this or that, or blah blah blah. And if only you had this experience, that kind of a thing. And that emphasis on personal experience in these circles as well is troubling. Not because it's a bad thing to trust your own personal experience. I think obviously that's a good thing, but to use that as the sole determinant for what's true, again, you're going to fall into traps. You're going to end up with your biases and so on and so forth. Cycle of growth, resonate, something that aligns with the belief I have, whether it is conscious or subconscious. Right. Okay. So something that fits into my pre-existing conceptions and my biases, and something that makes me feel like either reinforces my pre-existing beliefs, or can be added to them in a way that doesn't cause too much cognitive dissonance. Right? Is that it, or is that Kata, you said it's weird how they say we should do what resonates, then criticize everyone who doesn't agree with them. Yeah, it's fascinating, that, isn't it? How there is that us versus them sort of a thing. Like, if you're awakened, you'll do it this way. If you're not awakened, you'll do it this way. And those people are just, they're sheeple, they're not awake yet. And they'll come around. They will come around. There's that insinuation or that assumption that actually we are right and everyone else is going to agree with us sooner or later. And then the more people that do, they just take that as confirmation that they're right, not as confirmation that the ideas sort of appeal to people, that they're positioned in a way that is convincing, that there's a lot of people who are very charismatic and sort of broadly grifters who are using these ideas and popularizing them by appealing to people's needs. I mean, but it's definitely, we're definitely in an awakening right now, and we're definitely experiencing a great global awakening to the truth, not just two pandemics, one of literal physical health, and the other of misinformation and just bullshit generally. New Age, DIY religion. Do you know what? I've been thinking about this recently a lot. I feel like the New Age is, if it hasn't already in some places, it probably will sooner or later take over from Christianity. I'm wondering whether that will be the case. I know that Christianity, being tried and tested in the way that it has been, has, like, it's good at what it does. It knows how to plug into your pain, provide you with a solution for that pain, and then keep you coming back. Christianity is very good at that, and because of the God not being having a shape or a form, you can just fill it with whatever you need to in order to believe it's good, and so on and so forth. Whereas I feel with New Age, there is that issue of, with New Age, there's that struggling with, still there's a degree of struggling with the burden of liberty, like with religion. When you go into something like that, the burden of liberty is somewhat relieved by the idea that you're by the fact that you're now in a group of people who are in some way telling you what the truth is, and all you have to do is just don't worry about it, just sort of go along with it, to a lesser or greater extent. Whereas with the New Age, to a degree, the burden of liberty of not being in a movement at all, not subscribing to a pre-designed set of beliefs in some way at all, that's still there, that burden of liberty, because you're not involved in something that's prescriptive in a totalistic sense. but you are still involved in something which is to a degree prescriptive, and there is that system within the movement itself of rewards and punishments that we talked about there, where like if you do dissent, then your dissent is explained away. It's not listened to and considered. It's explained away as being less awakened or whatever. Again, not every time, but in a lot of cases. So I think in that sense, there is that New Age doesn't do everything that Christianity does for a person, right? But we are seeing it become more widespread, and it wouldn't surprise me if we're seeing people come from, like, because recently we've had that sort of merging in like conspirituality. We've had that merging of big time from like New Age into something like QAnon and just conspiracy theories more broadly. Obviously, as I've spoken about on the channel before, that's not a new thing. Conspiracy theories and New Age spirituality are like that's been for the longest time. Like I was a 9/11 truther before I was into New Age stuff, and then I got into the whole ancient aliens thing through spirit science, or just before spirit science, and then spirit science hooked me into the New Agey stuff, and then I found Teal and all that kind of stuff. Now we're seeing that big blending of New Age stuff with conspiracy theories more broadly. You've got obviously the anti-vax sentiment has increased more recently, and then you've got QAnon last year being a huge talking point in the news, but also it really did hit its stride last year as well. So it doesn't surprise me that that's happened, but it also wouldn't surprise me if now people who were not at all into New Age, not at all interested in this kind of stuff, have now found the more mystical branch of MAGA through like QAnon, or have found the sort of natural is better fallacies appealing in like anti-vax rhetoric or whatever, and then from there they're moving into natural health circles and then moving into all this other stuff. Right, Daniela, you've said, I've heard it called the New World. I think the attraction being the promise that you're going back to source when you ascend to 5D and not a fiery pit of hell. Right, so yeah, you've got that. Again, and with the New Age in general, it is such a repackaging of a lot of, maybe not Christian faith in every sense, although in some cases with like the ascended masters and the saints and stuff, but like definitely the repackaging of sentiments, repackaging of promises in different forms. And there's, with any mass movement, you get that sort of utopian vision, don't you, of like the future's going to be so great, and what we're going to do is tell you all about how bad the present moment is, which we talked about a little bit in the James Janney thing. There's the present moment awareness focus in the New Age, but generally they talk about how bad the world is right now. And you see this with all kinds of movements. You see it with cults and mass movements that are more or less destructive. Generally, you see it in Jehovah's Witnesses and all these kinds of groups where they will create this vision of the future. Then they'll create a vision of the present, which tells you how bad it is and how bad people are and how bad the world is. And then they'll look to the past and draw on the past as a framework for what the future could be. And you see it in New Age all the time. Like Ralph Smart's channel is a perfect example of that. He's talking all the time about, how our ancestors used to live, obviously ahistorically, like that's not actually how our ancestors used to live. And it wasn't as good as he seems to think it was, but, it's fascinating. But yeah, the new world, the new earth thing, Eckhart Tolle used that phrase, didn't he, in his book, The New Earth. Yeah, he used the phrase "the new earth" in his book, "The New Earth." But yeah, I think it's a new religious movement. That's the way that it's called. I don't like the idea of cults more generally being called new religious movements. Personally, I could understand the argument for it, but I feel like there should be a distinction between a destructive group and movement and perhaps potentially destructive at times in places movement, like for example New Age spirituality or Christianity or whatever. Those are religious movements, those are religious groups, but they're not as destructive as cults are. Destructive cults are every time. Do you know what I mean? But yeah. So I kind of went off topic there a little bit, didn't we? Let me just check through the chat and then we can talk about another word. So, Kata, you've said New Age is very similar to evangelical Christianity: manifestation, prosperity gospel, ascension, going to heaven, remain in the matrix. Yeah, I mean, yeah, going to hell. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Definitely agree with that. As I say, so much of it is repackaged from Christianity and other religions, and in many cases, it's not like that's not hidden. That's not something that believing sort of adherents to the New Age sort of more generally will deny. They will tell you, you know, it is ancient wisdom, and actually there's a little bit of truth in every religion. But what you often find, right, is that the most accurate rendering of a religious doctrine in New Age seems to be, in my experience, those from Christianity. They've taken Christian ideas and they've twisted them around and they've made them something else. There's a crystal for everything. There's an ascended master for everything. That's very similar to the saints, right? There's which I realize is more Catholicism than evangelical Christianity, but the point stands, I think. And then, yeah, you've got this idea of rewards and punishments with like the law of attraction, for example, which you see with you see that obviously within cults in more broadly, but you also do see that in Christianity there as you talk about sort of like, yeah, praying. I think is an interesting one. Praying is effectively the same thing as the law of attraction and manifestation. You say prosperity gospel there in the evangelical circles, ascension, going to heaven, remain in the matrix. What you're saying there, I think, is true as well. So you do see these kinds of themes recurring between one and the other. However, and this is where New Agers get accused of cultural appropriation, because the ideas that they bring over from other religions tend to be quite superficial renderings of those ideas. They tend to be stripped of their context and used to prop up a narrative which is defined long before those ideas are brought into the picture. And it's almost like the exoticness of these ideas from Eastern mysticism or whatever it sort of props up this general mystique of New Age ideas, this general idea that actually these things are ancient wisdom, you know, secrets hidden in plain sight, blah blah blah. You know, that's quite a fascinating thing. It's a bit off topic, but it's quite a fascinating thing. Do you know what? It's really nice to sit here and chat to you in this kind of a way, because we can go into the nitty-gritty things like that kind of stuff that I'm saying there. It's not always a place for that in the channel, especially like with the kind of videos that I've been making lately. You know, there's not always, I feel like it's not as engaging sometimes when I'm making an edited video like that, to sit down and like, I guess, philosophize on the nitty-gritty aspects of like the social element of New Age and the historical element of the New Age, you know. But like talking about talking about that aspect of New Age in general, there's definitely that focus with when you look back at like Helena Blavatsky and her influence on the New Age. That's one strain, that's one lineage of the New Age. One side of it is very much your prosperity gospel, your think and grow rich, you know, the Napoleon Hills, all the stuff that James Janney covered in his series on this kind of stuff. And then you've got the other strain, which is coming through the occult. And people like Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophical Society, and the lineage of that kind of more or less goes back to Plato and you know, early Western philosophy. And yet people like Helena Blavatsky have allegedly, according to, you know, followers of her, she went to the East and brought, you know, walked around, I believe, China and other countries, and learned things and brought them back and integrated them into her, you know, her teachings, her ideas. And, you know, if honestly, I wrote, I don't know where I wrote this, but I wrote this somewhere. If Helena Blavatsky was alive today and she had a YouTube channel, I would be making videos about her. Like, that's the kind of stuff that she was saying and coming out with. I just think that because it's older, because she's got a large following, there is more respect for what she's doing. And honestly, I have a bit more respect for what Helena Blavatsky is doing than that of the work of someone like, for example, Teal Swan or someone, you know. But then, you know, time heals all wounds. Who knows what she actually did at the time? Who knows who she was ripping off, if she was ripping anybody off. The trouble is with this kind of stuff, when you get into the New Age, when you get into the occult side of the New Age, there's genuinely decent people, genuinely useful ideas and stuff that can be used. Maybe not always, I wouldn't say with the supernatural component that exists, but sometimes useful things, sometimes worthwhile things. But then there's charlatans, there's frauds, there's scam artists, there's snake oil salesmen. There's just people constantly taking advantage of other people. So it's a very iffy area to get into. And I think the wellness industry today is comparable in that regard. Like, there are a lot of people who genuinely want to help, and there are a lot of people who are genuinely looking for answers. And then there's as many, if not more, and I would hasten to say more than double, people who just want to rip people off, just want to take their money, just want to sell them a panacea that doesn't really help, you know. But yes, let's get back to words. I'm going to respond to the chat again in a minute, because every time I read the chat, I go off on another tangent. So just give me 1 second. I want to stay on topic because I don't want this to be just going off on tangents. Let's do words. Manifestation. I feel like manifestation, right? And disagree with me if you do disagree with me, right? Obviously, when they use the word, they're referring to the idea of the power of your thoughts to literally alter reality and to make something that was always yours anyway and is currently yours anyway come into your reality, right? The idea of the law of attraction, right? But what they kind of mean is have. When they say like to manifest something, what they mean is to have that thing or to get that thing. And so what that does is it creates a mystique around the notion or the process of going about getting that thing. And then they use that ambiguity, by the sounds of it, oftentimes, to add in a bunch of other things that emphasize the power of your thoughts. And if only you think in this way, then you're going to get this thing that you want, which obviously isn't going to work, because it's not just thinking that is going to affect that. And then, of course, they go, well, it isn't just thinking, you have to take action too. At which point, what in this is supernatural? What then is the supernatural component of this? If you're thinking something and then you're taking action, and then that thing that you want comes into your life in some way, what is supernatural there? What there is energy and vibration and frequency? Someone explain that to me. Of course, people then go, well, it was so unlikely, or it happened so quickly. It's like, sometimes things do. Again, what's your point? What's your point? So another one, ascension. That's an interesting one. We did touch on ascension a minute ago, talking about how that fits into like the Christian evangelical stuff. But ascension is such an interesting one. And, you know, I did that video a while back on Christina Lopez's take on this. And since then, I've talked to a few people, and I've realized there's kind of two ways that ascension is used. And I don't know that it's always used, that those usages are always separate. And that makes me think that ascension is somewhat of a deipity. You might be familiar with the term deipity, but deipity is the idea that, yeah, something upon like first reading, it might, I'm trying to remember it now. I think I wrote it down somewhere here. I knew I needed it today, and I needed to get it right, but I'll try and explain it. I can never explain it concisely. I always try to. Let me try and explain this concisely, right? The idea of a deipity is something that when you first read it, it's like it's true in one way, but doesn't kind of really matter, right? It's not really that important, right? But then it's supposed to seem true in another way, but then when you look at it, actually it's not true at all. But if it was true, then it would be groundbreaking, right? So the idea of a deipity is something that seems to have two meanings, right? Double meanings. One that's true but inconsequential, and the other that's untrue, but if it were true, the world would have to change to sort of to compensate basically the enormous truth of this statement, right? And so ascension is kind of like that. It's kind of, on the one hand, it's like a metaphor for like thinking differently, basically, for like having a point of view that's a little bit, like, with a little bit wider perspective, broader horizons, less judgmental, somehow able to manifest more easily. That one crops up quite a lot. And then On the other side, it's the idea that you are literally, in a physical way, changing from a third dimensional being to a fifth dimensional being, or an eighth dimensional being, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, everyone's got a different point of view on that one. There is, when it comes down to it, everyone claims to believe in the same kind of stuff with a lot of this stuff, and yet no one can seem to agree on the specifics. It's a mess. This is why I say New Age is an awful mess. I say this all the time. So I've got a whole playlist called New Age is an Awful Mess, because they agree but they disagree. There's a cohesive ideology, and yet there is not a cohesive ideology. And that sounds like I'm just disagreeing with myself there or talking shit, but actually that's literally, if you've been involved in this stuff, you'll know exactly what I mean. Sybil, beneath the stream in the recommended list, the first video that shows up is Think Twice Before Wearing Black Clothing from Sadhguru. Very sad. This is someone that people have asked me to talk about a bit, and yeah, that is what to make of that. Really, I don't know. I would say I've thought twice before wearing black clothing before. Like today, for example, you can't see it, but I am covered in cat hair. In fact, you probably can see it up here where the light's shining. I'm covered in cat hair. Sadhguru's right. I'll follow someone who can unmanifest things. Yes. Healing. Let's talk about healing. That's a fantastic suggestion, Sophia. Healing. Right. My thing with healing, and I mentioned this, I think, on the Instagram the other day in one of the posts I did. It's no surprise, and this sort of links into something else I was saying earlier, actually, as well, that I didn't get to because I got distracted. But it's no surprise in New Age that there is such an emphasis on healing. It doesn't surprise me that that is the case, because so many people involved in New Age spirituality have mental health problems, are struggling in one way or another. I just think as a cross-section of the population in general, that's true. And it does seem to be the case that these kinds of ideas are popular among people who are particularly prone to struggle with their mental health. I know I got involved in it all when I was going through a particularly difficult time. And I've heard it said before that New Age is full of broken people with bleeding hearts, and I would say that's probably a bit harsh and a bit sort of too edgy, maybe. But I think the sentiment is ultimately, circling the truth. And so it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that there's such an emphasis on healing in New Age circles, because these are people who want to feel better. They want answers. They want to make sense of why things are so difficult for them or why they're struggling or whatever. Largely, these are people who have tried to go to like your mainstream, if you like, mental health care or doctors or whatever, and they've been dissatisfied, probably because what they needed was human empathy and not medicine oftentimes. Like, especially when like I hear this from a lot of people who are struggling with their mental health, and then they say, well, I went to a psychiatrist, it didn't help. And I'm like, I could see why a psychiatrist might help under certain circumstances. And I definitely think if it's something that people are thinking they might need, that they should definitely go to. And yet I often wonder whether, and I'm, again, no expert on this, so don't just take my word for this, but I often wonder whether what people need from a psychologist or from a therapist or counselor or whatever is that kind of presence, that sort of non-judgmental presence of someone who is capable of being there and listening and having empathy. And you don't get that when you go to the doctor. You don't get that oftentimes when you go to a psychiatrist. You get something colder, And I think in the case of healing, in the case of dealing with like genuine issues that you've got, that empathy goes a long way. Especially with emotional stuff. Actually, thorn in my side, you just made a fantastic point there. The implication of healing is wounded, and I agree with that. And it reminds me of something that I said. To someone a while back. I was talking to, and I said to them, "What do you want?" And this was when I was into the New Age thing, and I was doing my coaching and stuff way back when. Probably one of my finer moments in that time. But yeah, I was talking to them, and I said, what is it that you want here from all of this? What are you looking for with you're looking for coaching and you're looking for therapies. What is it that you want? And they said to me, to heal. And I said, what then? What after that? Like, what life do you want? If your emphasis is always on healing, then, and that is important. It is important to focus on that for a time, I think. And this is, again, just my point of view, but I feel like there's got to be a point, right, where you can look past that and go, what is the life I want to live? How do I want to be? What do I want after this? And I think that in New Age circles, oftentimes that emphasis on healing, that emphasis on your pains and on how life can be so difficult in one way or another, it kind of it does only compound it. In my mind, it in many cases could only compound that feeling of struggling, that feeling of being wounded. And so it's no surprise then that, to reiterate the phrase that I thought was too harsh before, that circles the truth, is that it's no surprise then that New Age is full of, broken people with bleeding hearts. And again, I feel like that's very harsh to say that, but there's an element of truth there. And I don't think I would say that if I wasn't once one of them, I'm definitely speaking from my own personal experience there in saying that. Sybil, you said, have you talked about the word empath earlier in the stream? No, I haven't. I wanted to do a full video on that, and I recorded it twice on Monday, and then I realized I was burnt out from last week, and then I went, do you know what? I'm going to do a live stream instead and give myself a few days. So we're doing this instead of me actually doing a video on empaths. But I was considering taking the audio from that video and just putting it on the Patreon, which you'll have access to, Sybil, and anyone else who's on the Patreon will have access to it. But yeah, I'm not sure how, when, what I'll do with that. But we could maybe have a little bit of a chat about, we can maybe have a little bit of chat about that in a minute. But let me come back around to that, because I just want to check through the chat briefly and see what people are saying. Psychiatrists just want to give you an SSRI prescription, and sometimes I think that might be the right choice. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't know about this kind of stuff, and maybe that is the right thing sometimes. But my point of view on that is that oftentimes medicine like that can provide you with a window of opportunity to work on your issues, so that you maybe don't need them, but some people may need them long term. But again, not an expert. Don't take my word for that. It's just my opinion, not medical advice. I want to be clear about that. Maybe moving on was what the wound stopped them from. It's so much. I mean, you said it here, hamster wheels. Yeah, so much of in these kinds of things, unfortunately. And by the way, if you're enjoying this discussion, you're enjoying this stream, please hit the like button. Really appreciate that. And if you've got your social media open at the moment, and you're enjoying this and you want to share it with anybody, then why not post it in your feeds, so that your other people who are interested in this can join us as well. We'll still go for a little bit now. We're by no means drawing to a close. We'll go for a little bit longer, because I do enjoy doing this, and I hope this is entertaining for you. Key, you've said they're obsessed with the transition rather than being at the place of health and doing things from there. I mean, that, interestingly, that ties into what we sort of said earlier about the nature of mass movements. It's the present state of affairs is never good. It's never good enough. It's always, it's like I'm referencing Eric Hoffer often when I talk about this kind of stuff. And one of the things that he says in his book, True Believer, which I definitely agree with, is that there is that emphasis on the idea that humans are infinitely perfectible, that we're never done, and that we could always be better. And that focus on driving to improve the person, driving to improve everything all the time. It may not always be bad. The idea that you can improve, I think, is definitely a good one, and it gives hope, and it can definitely be true. But at the same time, I wonder whether that focus on that all the time may not actually be so good, because it can draw you out of actually being able to appreciate what's going on in your life in that moment, and really enjoying things as they are. And yeah, you do see that oftentimes in New Age circles. There is that emphasis on like, let's make things better. Let's do things that are good for the future, that were once good in the past, but everything or most things that are happening in the now, other than the fact that people are awakening, are bad, unless you get into like the Eckhart Tolle sort of mindfulness side of this kind of stuff, which isn't always bad, but I think there's a time and a place for it, I think. So Derica, you said shame and perfectionism kept me coming back for more, like I could never be good enough. Church did the same thing. New Agers take advantage and ask for donations, and church people ask for offerings. Yeah, I mean, like we said before as well, I mean, those parallels are strong and persistent throughout both. And unfortunately, there is a lot of that in the New Age. That idea of like you need to try to always be high vibrational, be your best self. Be who you were here to be. You are realizing who you truly are, and who you've incarnated on this earth at this time to become, and all this kind of stuff. And yet, why can't we just learn to connect with ourselves as who we are, and really be able to appreciate who we are, warts and all? It's such an odd thing. Regina, yeah, makes sense. They get themselves stuck in the process and never get back to where they were. Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to my notes, because I've got another few here. Give me 1 second, bear with. Should we talk about awakening? Or should we talk about evolution? I tell you what, because we've been running for an hour now, I've got these ones on the list: awakening, evolution, or to evolve, speaking with ascended masters, and receiving downloads. Right, those are the ones I've got on the list. And then I've got a few people in the chat. Has said letting go, core, share core. What did I read your surname first? Share, you've said completion and enlightenment as well. Vote in the chat, right? Tell me what you'd like me to talk about. I'll do awakening, and then I'll do evolution, and then we'll get on to the others. The other ones are DNA activation. Oh no, I'm not doing DNA activation. I could do that, but I'm not doing that. It's going to take too long. Speaking with ascended masters, receiving downloads, and what were the other ones on the list here? Enlightenment, completion, and letting go. If there's any out of those ones, drop them in the chat. The ones I see most, we'll talk about shortly. But let's do awakening. So awakening is an interesting one, because effectively what they're saying is it's this idea of stepping into your power, like we were just saying there, becoming who you were meant to be, realizing how the world really works, which, pardon me, in the context of a lot of this kind of stuff, what they're saying, really what they mean is like you're realizing the truth, basically. Effectively you're realizing the truth, right? But what that actually means in practice is becoming convinced of a truth, or of the truth of a decent portion of the beliefs of the New Age, right? And oftentimes a lot of these ideas are like, for example, stepping into your power effectively means buying into and or embodying a lot of the empowering and individualistic notions within New Age thought. Becoming who you are meant to be is either and or, I would say, either and or both. Realizing you're an alien, which sounds so bizarre to just say it like that, but that's what it is. Realizing you're from another planet originally, or realizing you've got some kind of abilities, and I put realizing in inverted commas there, coming to believe, becoming convinced of your supernatural capacities and or supernatural or off-world origins, and then realizing how the world really works. What they kind of mean by that is, oh, hang on, I said and or, didn't I? Yeah, the alien stuff, that stuff, or becoming obsessed with self-help, personal development, and learning to kind of avoid who you actually are in an attempt to better yourself. Or then also realizing how realizing how the world really works is the third part of awakening, which is effectively buying into conspiracy theories and becoming convinced that conspiracy theories are true, right? So how the world really works is this whole ascension thing, right? Is this whole like matrix thing, and just these days it implies a degree of QAnon, whether it be pastel Q or like legit full on hardcore red pilled QAnon, but yeah, ultimately to become awakened in this context is no great shift in consciousness. It's literally just believing different things now, like and those things are categorically nonsense a lot of times, but as long as they're generally in keeping with the tone of the Church of Vibes, then yeah, you're awakened. Congratulations. So let's do, I'm going to give you a bit more longer to keep, fucking hell, my brain today. I'll give you a bit longer to drop your votes in the chat for what you want what you want me to talk about shortly. I'm then gonna talk about evolution, or the idea of evolving. But before I do that, I just want to quickly go over to here, and I want to drop this on the screen, and I want to just let you know that, and you may have seen this in other videos anyway, but whenever I put videos out, I'm putting 2 out a week at the moment, sometimes live streams like this, sometimes 2 edited videos a week. Whenever I do that, there's stuff I can't include in the videos, like time constraints, or just like, because YouTube like doesn't like you to talk about certain things on the platform. So one of the things I've started doing is I've started creating these audio companions where I just sort of explore that topic in a little bit more detail on my Patreon, and I've had some good feedback on it. People are enjoying that content at the moment. There's one of those a week, and then occasionally just the odd little thing here and there. And then at the end of the month as well on the Patreon, what I do is a live stream kind of like this, but exclusively for patrons, where I sort of talk a bit more behind the scenesy stuff and explore things in whatever patrons want to talk about in the chat. And I also do book recommendations as well, whenever I've read enough books to find a decent one to warrant a recommendation. So if you are enjoying the channel, if you want a bit more extra content from me every week, or if you just want to support the channel, if you're enjoying what I'm making and you want to let me know, then check out the Patreon. There's a link in the description. Really appreciate any contributions, be it at the lowest level, which is like $2, or even up to the top tier, which is actually going to be part of a new thing I'm starting to do, which is like a discussion kind of a group thing, which will start soon, where we kind of look at we take a topic and sort of pick it apart together, and just sort of practice skepticism and critical thinking. Because I talk about all the time like how critical thinking is a skill and skepticism is a skills, and you've got to practice. I feel like this idea where we sit down and we discuss things is a great way to do that without being obnoxious with our loved ones. We can just kind of sit there and just sort of pick things apart and explore them a little bit. So if you're interested in anything that I just said there, or you just want to support the channel, then please check out the Patreon in the link in the description. Hugely appreciate that. Anybody who's already a patron, how grateful I am for your support. And anybody who becomes a patron, please know that I'm very grateful for that. So that said, let's get to talking about evolution, the idea of evolving in a new age context, and then I'll just check the chat and see what people want, see what you want me to talk about for our final new age term that means nothing. And I say means nothing, obviously that's tongue-in-cheek. They mean something, it's just that what they mean is usually not warranting the use of the word. So evolution, the idea of evolving. So in new age circles, the idea of evolving implies improvement. It implies, like, if we're evolving, humanity, we're evolving, the evolution of consciousness, right? The implication is that we are getting better, that in that context, evolution is the improvement of our awareness of a given thing, or the capabilities of our consciousness, or whatever. And consciousness is another one. Maybe when we do a part 2 of this, we'll start on consciousness, because fuck me, that's a shit show. But with evolution, yeah, it's that thing of like that implication that actually to evolve is inherently good or inherently beneficial or inherently worthwhile. But the process of evolution is not inherently towards something better, right? And I'm drawing a little bit from John Michael Greer in talking about this, who's made a point very similar to this in the past. The idea of evolution, it doesn't necessarily mean that during the process of evolution, what's happening is that you're getting like better. Or Thorn in my side, he said, I think New Age evolution is a pirate copy of Pokemon. and that actually makes my point really well. In New Age, there is that idea that if you evolve, you become slightly less cute, and slightly more likely to fuck a person up. And yeah, just sort of more broadly better, stronger, more capable. But actually the process of evolution is a messy one, and successful evolution, yes, tends to result in better adaptations to the environment. But that's the point, is it not, with this? Like, to evolve is to adapt to your environment. So to evolve is not always to grow in a way that's better for you 100% of the time. If you're in a bad situation and you evolve to adapt to that situation, the improvement is relative to your ability to survive that situation, which in an evolutionary context is fantastic. That's fantastic, right? But in a broader sense, it doesn't necessarily translate into improvement, because you can adapt to bad situations and not leave those situations because you've adapted to them, right? And that's a very human thing, right? Yeah. But yeah, I feel like that's that for me with evolution. It's that implication that it is in some way like like Sybil, you've said here. It's the New Age way of saying leveling up, right? Spiritual glow up. Yeah, exactly. That kind of a thing. And yet the implication is that it is in some way good, and it's always going to be good. But evolution is a messy process, and the outcomes aren't always good, you know. And I think with this kind of thing, just to sort of go, I guess, a level deeper or step back from it a little bit, it comes with that idea. It comes along with the New Age habit of repackaging or repurposing scientific words to make their own ideas sound more credible. And you see that with people like Joe Dispenza, you know, using the language of science to position ultimately vapid notions as revolutionary or the solution to your problems. And what you often see with someone like Joe Dispenza, who I do want to talk about more at length on the channel, is that what he will do is he will say a lot of the things that he says, and use sciencey language to build your sort of trust in him and edge you closer and closer and closer to the point where ultimately he says, you know, what you need to do is bypass your analytical mind, shut off your analytical mind, and effectively do hypnosis using his meditations. That's effectively what he's selling there. But he'll do it in this way where he's talking about, you know, and we feel chemically that we need to fire and wire our neurons in different ways. And like, to an extent, that means something. But in the context of what he's saying, he seems to be using that language to add credibility to what he's trying to get across, and make you more likely to trust him and believe in the next thing he's saying. It's a classic grift move. You see it all the time. And I've said again, and talking about the Instagram I mentioned before, I'm always talking about the Instagram now. I made a post on there a while back talking about the fact that sort of these kinds of people, I use the word charlatans on there. The fact that charlatans say some true things is not a redeeming quality. It's part of their grift. They say true things to hook you in, to make you feel like what they're saying is perhaps generally has a higher truth content than it does, you know. To speak in Joe Dispenza's language, has a higher truth quotient, you know. Melissa said, yep, you're speaking about the old me when I was in New Age. If you don't vibrate the same as length and resonate with me, with the universe upgrades, then you're not awake. Yeah, I mean, basically it's that, isn't it? I just spat then. Fantastic spitting. But yeah, it's basically that. So let me just scroll through and see what the general sentiment is on the next one. I'm seeing downloads. I'm seeing downloads. I'm seeing downloads. I'm seeing downloads. So it looks like downloads is the most popular here, because I am seeing downloads. Did I mention I'm seeing downloads? I'm seeing downloads, by the way. So I think downloads is the way to go. The word's lost all meaning. I've said it too many times already. Yeah, so in the New Age context, right, that's like, and in fact, we were just saying using sciencey sounding language to add credibility to something that someone's saying, right? Is that not the same thing? Is that not exactly what that is? Is that not a new repackaged version of psychics getting a message from your sweet old granny? She's fine, by the way. She's fine on the other side. She's passed over. Is that not just a new version of the same thing? It's just that now, in order to keep up, where the language has changed. It's changed from, writing letters with ink and a quill and parchment to sending and receiving data. It's just is modernized. Is that not exactly the same thing? But again, it's the same kind of a thing as I think you said actually here in the chat, Sybil. Downloads or whatever I've pulled out of my ass. I think I saw you say that. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Downloads, aka what I just pulled out of my ass. It's the same kind of thing. And this is the trouble I have with channeling as well, which downloads are basically channeling, aren't they? When they say it, when a New Ager says, I'm getting a download right now, it's ostensibly the idea that they're receiving information from a third party disembodied entity and or some sort of energetic, like the Akashic records or whatever, right? That the information itself has some degree of consciousness and wants to come through, or someone is sending that message to you and you're downloading that now, right? Ostensibly that's what it is, but in practice it really does seem like someone's just decided that they want to say something, but they're adding a level of mystique to it to, again, add credibility, or to avoid the responsibility of saying something that's probably quite antisocial. The fact that, honestly, I think the fact that people would want to sit there and just kind of tell people things. Honestly, I feel like, what was I going to say? Honestly, I feel like a lot of times with this kind of thing, when people say this, like, I'm getting a download, the thing that they want to say is something that either A, if they just said it as the person that they are, it probably wouldn't be listened to, because they generally don't want to explain why they feel that thing or think that thing. So it's almost like a way to avoid like hashing out logically why that thing is applicable or why that thing is necessary, because it's come from a feeling on their part, probably because it's intuitive, and in a way I prefer the idea that I'm intuitively, I feel this, then I'm getting a download. It's like an extra level of grandiosity, isn't it? But yeah, I lost my train of thought a bit there. But I feel like with downloads, that's very much that, isn't it? It's so similar to the psychic messages of old, which we do have now. But as I was watching a Vice documentary on empaths the other day, and one of the things that was said by one of these guys who's making money off of empathic services and performance art, basically, was psychic's on the way out. The word psychic is on the way out, and it's being replaced now by new things. That does happen with these kinds of things. You've got downloads, and you've got the Matrix now. All of this kind of, to an extent, it's pop culture with the Matrix, but it's also technological language, which, and again, this is talking about Joe Dispenza. He's a great example of this, using metaphors in that way to oftentimes they'll use technological metaphors to denote what's bad and natural metaphors to denote what's good. So Joe Dispenza talks about losing your free will to a program, and then talks about stepping into the river of change. So that's quite an interesting one. But then also, thank you. If you say thank you to me or someone else that said that, but that's effectively what that is. I'm assuming I don't know why, but I'm assuming you're referencing something I said there. I didn't use that terminology, but I didn't use those words. But that's basically what that is. Outsourcing credibility. but yeah, it's new language. It's new language for the same stuff. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think, you know, got to go to the Lua and make a download. Fantastic. So there are more New Age terms. We will never run out of New Age terms. There are countless New Age terms that we could sit and discuss ad nauseum, I'm sure. But I think we'll draw it to a close soon today, if that's all right with everybody. My brain is beginning to turn to mush. But I do want to say, there's a few things I want to say before we go. One of the things I want to say is at the moment, with the Patreon, we're actually quite close to a Patreon goal. And the goal, I think it's 42 patrons. When we hit 42 patrons, I'm going to be doing like a live streaming marathon, where I'm going to sit and do something like this, but I'm going to go for much, much longer, deliberately as a celebration of that. And as a way to kind of, you know, sit and spend time with the community and connect and stuff. So if you want to help that happen sooner, then check out the Patreon. And you may be the one patron when we hit that 42 patrons. You may be the one that makes that happen. And if you're not the one, you'll be one of the ones that makes that happen. And as I said earlier, I'm always very grateful for any support on Patreon anyway. But yeah, that's going to be quite exciting when that happens. And yeah, we've seen recently with the Patreon the fact that that we are Patreon what it is, and just wonderful supporters like Mark and Marie, who are there in the chat. That this it's because of them and patrons generally that the channel is coming to life more and more, and things are improving. I'm able to do more and more things like this. For example, today is going out on YouTube and on Facebook, which is quite cool. So I don't know if you're watching on Facebook, but if you are watching on Facebook, let me know, drop a comment or something. That's all going to come up in one chat, in the one chat. But yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed this little foray into the bizarre world of the new age terminology. I think it was long overdue. I've been wanting to do something like this on like New Age glossary overall for a while now. So this has been fun. But yes. So what to say really? Please do follow me on Instagram. Before I go, I want to say that one more time. Definitely do that. I'm over there every day posting stories and little slides and stuff. I've been writing something about pseudoscience today that I want to put up tomorrow. I put one up last night about plagiarism in New Age circles. So yeah, definitely follow me on there. But yes, thank you everyone for being here. As ever, wonderful vibe in the chat. Loving it. You're all fantastic. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I say my sign off as normal. I'll say, if you enjoyed the video today, please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell thing. Otherwise, please be kind and ask good questions, and I'll see you in the next one. And I'm going to put the beginning brand on again now and say thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.